Good afternoon and welcome to the Book Buzz Club Live. Okay, I want to tell you about an unusual individual who is our guest. This person's from the Uwharrie Forest, not far from rainy hurricane-pounded North Carolina shoreline. Okay, now she is a person who lives in the woodlands and does a monthly podcast, weather cooperating podcast, and catering to those curious about the paranormal occurrences and the mystery of Bigfoot. Her name is Julie Rench, and she is the host of Monster X Radio. And before we get into that, I'll introduce my co-host here today. We have Mr. Leon Thompson. How are you doing, Leon?
Pretty good.
And the indomitable, inimitable Thomas Steenburg. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, Jerry. Just got a message from Bill. He's having internet trouble.
He's having internet trouble. Yep. Okay, what can you take for that, hey? Mm-hmm. I guess there's no pill for that. Well, okay, we'll go without Bill and leave it to Bill to take his pills, and he'll be with us shortly, I hope. And I want to introduce our guest today. Very special lady, Miss Julie Rench. Hello, Julie. How are you today?
Hello, I'm doing really good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Now, your home state is North Carolina, and you say you live on the edge of the Uwharrie Forest. And is it true that North Carolina has an ample supply of paranormal activity? You think you got your fair share?
Oh, yes, definitely. The area that I'm at right now is actually has the most reported sightings and encounters of Bigfoot of any other county in the whole state of North Carolina. So I'm like right in the middle of the zone.
Right in the thick of it. Okay, so I want to ask you then, in that case, you've been pretty well surrounded by all of these stories all your life, correct? Growing up in that area?
Yes, absolutely.
So now my research tells me there are even ghost tours available throughout the state, including Battleship, North Carolina Ghost Hunt, and the Asheville Ghost Tour, etc. Have you ever heard of these organizations before?
Oh, yeah. I've actually been on that Battleship over there in Wilmington.
And what do they provide?
Well, basically, they walk you through the ship and they tell you about the different alleged ghost stories and then who they think the ghosts might be. Different people that may have passed on the ship, that kind of thing. And it's really, I tell you, it's really kind of eerie down in that, the bottom part, where I think there was a gentleman that had died working on a boiler or something down there. But yeah, I mean, it gets real eerie because the hallways are so small. And I mean, if you're claustrophobic, that's enough to scare you when you go down to the bottom of that boat.
Yeah, and I guess the thing is, what's cool about it is then personalizing the people who used to work and live on that boat. So it's not just, blank faces. You try to put a face with the person who is no longer with us anymore.
Yes, and they also do have some photographs that you can look at of, people that were important characters on the ship. And they feel that there are some people who may be coming back there in a spiritual form who didn't necessarily die there, but who were on that ship for a long time, and it was pretty much, their obsession. So it doesn't necessarily have to be someone that passed away on that ship or related to that ship.
Oh, I get you. That sort of covers all the bases.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
all ghosts are welcome. Please report to the back of the boat.
that's right.
So tell me, eventually you started to study and to take an active interest in the weird and wonderful stories in your area. So did anyone in your family or anything like that have an odd occurrence that might have spurred your interest in this subject?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you, my ancestors, the Brutons, the last name is the Bruton family. They actually moved here from Britain in 1745 and helped settle this area, actually, and we're still here. And there were stories that were passed down about this area, and they called it the Wild Man of the Woods or the Screaming Man. And there used to be reports of them having rocks thrown at them while they were out logging or out, building new houses, that kind of thing. And it was like they just didn't know what to think at first. And then they actually caught glimpse of these things, and they described them as being around 8 feet tall, very broad shouldered, kind of antsy, like they would move about quite a bit and then they would pick up the rocks and throw it at them and try to scare them and scream at them. And I think that what was going on is they were trying to get them to leave the area because, here they come and start logging the forest and building log homes and all that stuff. And, that was the first time anyone besides the natives that were here had come into that forest and did things that, the natives wouldn't normally do, like cut all the trees down and, make a mess of the place. So I think that they were probably very concerned about seeing those people. And so that was, we were talking late 1700s, 1800s. And then my grandmother, it wasn't necessarily in this area, but growing up, my grandmother, she lived in the hollers of West Virginia, and there was this old store down the road from her place. And like I said, she lived in the holler, and back then it was like you don't have all the street lights and stuff like you do now. And she was this was probably back in, let's see, she was born in 13, so it would have been 20 in the 30s. And she had walked down to that little store, and she was all walking on her way back, her and the gal that lived down the road from her, and they had something stalking them in the wood line and breathing really heavily, and they kind of could see some shadow in there, but she said it was a huge gigantic man that was like trailing them in the woods and right at the wood line. And then later on she found out that these Bigfoot things existed in the area where she was in West Virginia, and she thought that that's what was actually trailing them. So I heard about that story growing up, so that always intrigued me, wanting to find out more about this.
Yeah, Thomas, could you think back a bit and recall any other cases as the one that she just described where rocks were thrown at people who were moving into an area, whether it's for mining, camping, logging, or whatever?
Well, what I know about in Julie's area, actually during the Revolutionary War, There was a couple of stories I read about where the British claimed to have had a few sightings of what they described as very strange Indian people that seemed rather large and hairy, scurrying away from them at times when they were marching in column through the woods and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there was a few stories like that. And of course, I imagine the same story is true for the other side of the revolutionaries. And this kind of stuff is history, though the idea of Sasquatch or Bigfoot wasn't on anyone's brain back then. You were referring to wild men or just another Indian group.
Yeah, well, I mean, they had the same thing on the east coast of Canada and such, Labrador and Newfoundland and everything, with the Vikings. Now, the Vikings had these people, too, that were described as hairy people.
Yeah. And
they call them Skraelings. And it's pretty well the same type of encounter, too. You know, attack, run away kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, you know, they were getting the point across, you're not welcome here. Get out of here, you know. And I think every invasive colonization type group has more or less the same story to tell, you know. But Julie, tell me, when did you become a co-host on Monster X Radio? Originally, I think it was just the two, Shane Corson and Gunnar Monson. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. It was Shane and Gunnar, and I came aboard to help out with their Facebook group and be an admin for the group. And then they were like, you know, we could really use another co-host. And they brought me in kicking and screaming because
Okay.
I was quite nervous, very nervous. But they said, oh, you'll do great. And then I think that was probably, well, it was 10 years ago when I got involved with Monster X, but then it was probably, I think I was there maybe a year. And then that's when I started doing my first shows with them, co-hosting, and, you know, and then the rest is history. So it's been at least 9 years.
Yeah. So tell me then, how did On the Shoulders of Giants with Thomas Steenburg come about? And I will let you two take the floor and explain it between you, how all of this came about.
Okay, yeah, that I'll tell you, back when I really started getting into investigating the history, see, to me, one of the most interesting things about all this was the history of research, investigating, and investigators, because I didn't realize there was such a colorful cast of characters that was, you know, the originals, if you will. And I started researching them, and of course there's DeHenden and Titmus and Green, and I started learning their characters, and then come along this Thomas Steenburg, and I'm like, Thomas Steenburg from Canada. So I started investigating who Thomas Steenburg was, because, you know, his name was in a lot of the stories that I was reading about, and you know, a lot of things about his type of research, and, you know, research reports, and I knew he had written some books. And then now see Gunnar Monson from Monster X Radio. He was part of Operation Sea Monkey. And that was where Thomas and Gunnar and Thomas Seawood, and I can't remember who else was there. Thomas can put the rest of the names in for me, but I know they went on this boat up there was that in Alaska, Thomas, or British Columbia?
British Columbia, on the islands between Vancouver Island and the mainland.
Okay, that's right. And I told Gunnar, I said, man, when you see Thomas Steenburg, you tell him I said, hey, and I'm his biggest fangirl. And and he did. He told Thomas. And then he actually filmed Thomas for a moment for me on his phone and then sent me the clip. And I think Thomas said, "Hello, Julie," or something like that. And I was like, "That's so cool." And then we got to talking about the old timers, Gunnar and Shane and I. And I was like, we need to get all this documented. Not just down on paper or in a book. You need to get it in audio. And I was like, I wonder if he would be interested in doing some shows with me and just talk about all of the stuff at the beginning of this enigma with the original players who most defined to be, original, the four horsemen of Sasquatchery and that sort of thing. And I was like, I wonder if he would be interested. Well, he did agree to do that. And I'll tell you, I was thinking we were going to do, maybe 10 shows, 10, 12 shows, and it would cover everything. And then that'd be and that would be that. And we could put it in archives and have it forever. But that was 5 years ago. And we are still doing the show, and it was awesome, and it is awesome. And I think we have 48 shows that we've done. We just do like one a month because that's what we started doing, because I was doing the other shows with Monster X Radio at the same time. I was doing like 4 to 5 interviews a month.
Wow.
But anyway, we had we were having an absolute blast, and him just talking about some of the stories of the Hendon and Green and Titmus and all the guys, and the stories, the behind the scenes stories were absolutely hilarious, some of them, and others were quite serious. So Thomas is a walking dictionary of Bigfoot history related to the original investigators that are more well known, you know what I'm saying. And I just thought it was fascinating, and I have learned so much from Thomas. And we didn't even start out having guests. It was just he and I speaking back and forth about things. And I was like, the first show, I was so nervous I couldn't hardly breathe. Thomas had no clue.
I'd just like to point out, originally the show was going to be called On the Shoulders of Giants, talking with the young and handsome Thomas Steenburg, but for some reason changed that.
Yeah, I can't imagine why. But, so what's your story on your end, Thomas? Did you wake up next morning and say, I don't know who she is, I never talked to her, I have no idea?
Well, actually, I used to listen, like on nights when I was home, I used to listen to Monster X podcasts. There was a number of them, and quite often Julie was a guest host.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once or twice she was a guest host on programs that I was on, and that's correct, right, Julie? And
Yes.
And she told me about the idea of her own podcast, talking old timers, because she wanted to, get down some of the stories of, memories of mine with, John Green, Randy Hendon, Vladimir Markotic, Grover Krantz, and so on and so forth. And she was basically doing on air what Bill and Leon and you have been bugging me to do for decades, which was to stuff down so it's not lost to history, and it worked out well. It mostly had to be done on the old blog talk format, because Julie, where she is, as we can see tonight, quite often can get computer links to work, kind of like Bill here, and he can't get his to work.
Oh, isn't that the other way around? Yeah.
We've had everybody on the show. Everybody from Daniel Perez, like we had on the 20th episode, we had Bob Gimlin come on, and And the show was really, really well received, though I never could see any of the comments of the audience that Julie could. So I had no idea if the show was catching on or not. But apparently it has, because we've been doing it for 5 years now. And we just wrapped up our 48th episode a couple of days ago. Matter of fact, she's posting it today, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. It's. I think that you're probably the most documented Bigfoot researcher, maybe in the world, except for somebody who's written about 15 or 20 books, Lauren Coleman or somebody. But I think your exploits and your experiences and the evidence that you've collected over the years, I think even thus far it has been so well documented through sources such as what we're doing right now, and many, many other podcasts as well. I mean, I laugh when I hear somebody say, Thomas Steenburg, he gives all the same answers all the time. And as you said, well, if you stop asking the same questions, I wouldn't give you the same answers all the time.
Yeah, I've heard that. He said that because history doesn't change. You want to know what really happened, or do you want me to make stuff up?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. Make stuff up. Make stuff up. It's a lot more entertaining. Yeah. Tell me your story.
Hey,
Yeah,
Julie,
but I'm sorry. Go, Bill.
we've got a question from one of the people on that are watching, and it says, "Is Julie also known for her tree stand work, or is he thinking of someone else?" I'm not exactly sure what that means, but maybe you would, Julie.
Tree stand work. I'm not sure. I don't know if they mean something to do with the audio project that I did with David Ellis for the last 5 years, if that's what they're talking about.
Well, maybe Trackway can elaborate in the comments, and if he elaborates, I'll let you know.
Hey,
Okay.
Bill, could you quickly run down the comment section there and just say who's watching us here tonight?
Sure, we've got Finding Trackway, Nikki from Sasquatch Secrets, and we've got Raptor Crazy.
Cool. Now, as I was going to ask, how long, Julie, how long have you and Thomas been doing this on the Shoulders of Giants?
5 years.
Wow. And you haven't booted him off yet, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been very. It doesn't feel like it's been 5 years, though. I'll tell you, it's unbelievable. It's been that many years, and it is very well received. I mean, we have people from Ireland, Bruce Goflo from Ireland, who is always PMing me going, "When's the next episode? Where's the next episode? When are you doing the next episode?" So, we have people from Europe listening in. So,
and by the way, I just want to say now for you, those of you who are watching on stream and not listening to the podcast version, the reason you can't see Julie's face is because her camera is shut off. That's because of the weak connection she has living in the woodlands like she does. And she's been known to drop off from time to time and not be able to get back on again. So that's why
Yes.
Julie's incognito tonight with just a picture of her. Because I just wanted to explain that, because I know it can drive some people batty when they can't see the person who's talking, Now,
Actually, Jerry's
I know.
Jerry's telling a fib. Julie's about 8.5 feet tall, about 5 feet wide at the shoulder, and has a conical shaped head. So,
her secret is out. Yeah, her secret is out.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I think I just should remind the audience that for some reason on Facebook and the Canadian media rules, most of our episodes of On the Shoulders of Giants cannot be viewed on Facebook. Matter of fact, all the ones I had on my I used to have them all on my Facebook page, and they all got taken down, and I can't post them anymore. But there were 2 episodes we did on a different format that didn't disappear. So because Julie and her situation has to use that old phone-in blog talk format, for some reason that breaks some sort of media content rule in Canada, and we can't post the episodes. We can just put a link to them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something.
Yeah, it's weird, but I don't really understand it. But
well, you can check what your tags are on it, because if you have a tag such as news or current events or something like that, that's all tags that will to show that it can't be shown. So that's what I would look at. I would go back into the settings on your blog, see what your taglines are, see if any of the descriptors mention current events or news, and if they do, remove them and then try again. But that's just a suggestion.
Well, I think it has to do with Facebook and Canada's. Thomas, you would know more about it, but there was something to do with the media that was it Canada was trying to have people pay for something, and Facebook said no, or
no. What it is companies like Google, Facebook, and other the multinationals, quite often in their stories they would link to Canadian news services like CBC, CTV, or whoever. So the Canadian government, in their infinite wisdom, decided that those multinationals were stealing revenue from those news sites by hosting their news, which is complete malarkey, because they're actually directing traffic to those websites. So what they did is they wanted a fee where every time somebody clicked on one of those links, then Facebook would have to pay a fee to the government, and then they would supposedly get it to the media sources. So that's where it came. That's why I suggest, because it's only for things like news, current events, and that sort of thing. That's why I suggest you look at how your tags are in your system, because that's part of what the bots use, is those taglines.
Now you see, as an old timer, I for one really enjoy the audio format that Julie operates in. I mean, radio is a great love of mine. So, I enjoy doing the podcast version as well as the streaming version, especially dealing with the paranormal, because the podcast version allows you just to close your eyes and become immersed in the subject. It translates the subject much better, in my opinion, having just audio instead of streaming. But that's just me, I do both. I'll also put this on a podcast when we're through with it. It goes up on YouTube, and I'll also put it on a podcast too with another organization. And you can pick it up anywhere where you pick up a podcast. You can pick up the Bigfoot Crew, So I like that. I like that. So tell me, Julie, do you in particular still do paranormal programs as well as Bigfoot?
Well, I was involved at one time with Mike Richburg and Adam Davies. They had a podcast that they were doing. There was different podcasts under the umbrella of what Mike Richburg was doing, and there was some of it was paranormal, and then I did the Sasquatch, and Vanessa Hogel, she's a psychic. She was doing the ghost and different type of paranormal stuff. And I did appear on some of their shows, as a guest, but I have never really got too involved in the paranormal as a host. It's mostly just been Sasquatch.
So you were telling me about about a member of your family, an aunt or something. I think you talked about it earlier. Was walking down the road and something was shadow walking along with her.
Mm-hmm.
And do you
Yeah,
believe
that
that?
was
Yeah. Do
well.
you
My
believe?
my grandmother thought that it was possibly could have been a Bigfoot because she had found out later that those things were in the area, and they always did hear a bunch of weird, like screaming coming from the woods, and can't remember what it was they called it, but it was unusual. It wasn't fox, it wasn't a lynx, it wasn't a, because they knew all the sounds living in the. She was born and raised basically in the woods. Um,
Mhm.
but they did hear a lot of strange sounds coming out of, and this was just outside of Charleston, West Virginia,
Yeah.
and they'd heard a lot of strange noises, but it wasn't until years later somebody was talking about the thing that they had seen in the woods in that area, and they didn't call it Bigfoot or anything because it wasn't known as Bigfoot back then, but they were talking about the strange hairy creatures and things like that. So she thinks what it could have been one of those things that was, following along as they were walking on that old dirt road, just watching them.
Yeah. So you live on the edge of the Uwharrie Forest, and tell me, does any of this ever seep into you and give you kind of creeps, or like say, oh, what was that noise, or did you ever have any moments like that?
Yeah.
Like
When
not
I
on,
was
not only do
doing,
I want my flashlight, I want my gun too if I'm going out there.
yeah, exactly. Well, I'll tell you, when I was doing this audio project, with David Ellis from the Olympic Project. Now, what he does is he takes the audio and puts it in a program and listens and also looks because it goes to a spectrogram. And
Hmm.
basically, he's looking for signatures of unusual type noises and things that don't necessarily match any known species in your area, but
Yeah.
match things from different places all across America that are also happening in hot spots. Um, but those sounds aren't matching anything known over there either. Like, for example, in Washington State, there was a person that was doing an audio project with him over there, and she lived on the side of a mountain, and she was giving him the audio. He was, going through and checking it all out. And there were so many things that she had recorded from her property that sound exactly and also look very, very similar in a spectrogram. The signatures matched from her area to my area on those unknown suspicious sounds. Now, if you don't see what made the sounds, of course, you can't say it's this or it's
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It was just interesting to see how well they matched up, not just from Washington to here, but all different places throughout America where he's been, having people turn in audio, where there's audio projects going on. And it's really interesting because some of the noises that came from here, my God, it sounded like, well, when people hear it, they're like, that sounds like Jurassic Park
Yeah.
because it's so god awful strange sounds going on. And I've heard it when I was at the fire pit. I've had people. Adam Davis has actually come here and sit at this fire pit with me, and several other researchers over the years have come. And it's just really some very odd sounds. And I've recorded. Now check this out. The really creepy thing about all this is I've actually caught EVPs on my audio device when I leave it out overnight. I've caught full blown conversations of little children and all this other weird stuff, and people saying, well, stuff like, why won't you come out and help me? And one time I heard something say, Julie, please come out of the house. And, stuff like that. So it's been really weird hearing voices that shouldn't be there at 3, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And a lot of it always has something to do with help me or come out of the house, or I also caught an EVP. The woman's voice said, you there? They're burning me. So that was kind of creepy. But, I've caught more EVPs by mistake than I would if I had probably intended to do so, because I've got, hours and hours and hours of recordings here. And I think one of the most interesting things about this property is the Uwharrie Mountains over here. They used to be 25,000 feet tall at one time. They were the largest, the most tallest mountains in North America at one time, 500 million years ago. They have deteriorated down to the tallest one at this time is now 1,200 feet. If that tells you how, over time, how much is deteriorated.
Eroded.
Yeah, eroded and deteriorated. Now, my property is completely full of granite and quartz. I mean, you cannot take a step outside my back door unless you look down and you're walking on quartz or granite underneath the ground. You could pick any spot out there, stick a shovel in there, and you're going to pull up huge rocks of quartz. So I know that a lot of people think that quartz can hold on to energy or, different type of events. You hear people talk about that in the ghost hunting world, water, granite, quartz.
Yeah.
But I think there's something to that, because it can get real creepy out there at night. You'll hear things, you'll see things moving, you'll see shadows. I had that psychic came here, that Vanessa Hogel came here. And as soon as she pulled up to my house, she gets out of the car and runs down to behind the barn. She says hi as she's running past me to go behind the barn because there's something out behind the barn. And she wanted to go see who he was. And it was a spirit.
Now you see, I got nothing against the paranormal. I think there are a lot of weird things out there that suffer from need of an explanation. I don't have anything against the woo per se, as long as they stick to their own side of the road and don't cross over into a zoological problem like Bigfoot or Sasquatch, because they're two different things altogether. And when you mix them together, you open a can of worms. And that's when you get people at each other's throats about things. But the paranormal itself that you're talking about, I find that very interesting.
Well, what's interesting as well is that when Julie talks about hearing voices and that, a lot of the stories, especially when you get up onto the northwest coast here of British Columbia, when they're talking about various whether it's hairy man type spirits, is they talk about how, especially with women, that they'll get would be historically lured out of the village by the sound of either crying children or family members or friends voice being mimicked to lure them out.
Yeah.
And then of course, when you have, if you're a believer in Pilates, I am not, his spurious connection to the granite and that. So, when you look at everything Julie's talking about, if you were into some of the historical mythology of some of the First Nations and some of the modern paranormal, she's connected all the dots. So it's interesting for somebody that has an interest in both the paranormal and Sasquatch.
I just
Yeah,
like
and I think that the whole thing with the whole woo and Bigfoot is, um, you can't solve a mystery with another mystery, first of
No,
all. And then when you start talking nonsensical things that just, I mean, I have a pretty high tolerance for other people's beliefs and that, I'm not going to judge a person, but don't be stupid. Okay. I'll be the one to say, don't be stupid. Um, Bigfoot isn't turning into trees at night. Okay. Let's just get that straight right now. Not going to happen. That's not scientifically possible. And when people say that stuff, it just, I don't know. But that's just me saying.
I just want
Um, I
go
don't
ahead.
think they're coming from another planet either. I
No.
really don't see how that's possible. I hear a lot about that. But I mean, just be sensible about it. Try to apply science. Always try to apply science first. And then if that doesn't work, how about some Occam's razor, a little bit of
Mhm.
common sense, that sort of thing. People jump to so many conclusions too quickly, and they're, calm down and think logically, and you try to use some science.
I
And
know you
that's
see.
on top of that, Julian. I'm glad you brought that up. Is one of the favorite expressions of these people is anything's possible. And anything
Yeah.
possible is categorically wrong. And then
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
they will use phrases such as, at one time it was impossible for men to fly. That's not correct. It was never impossible for men to fly. What was impossible at the time was that we didn't have the knowledge. But just because science has advanced and given us knowledge doesn't mean that anything is possible. For example, it is not possible for me to click my fingers, do a tap dance on the sun, and click my fingers again and come back. Can't do that now. That ain't possible. Science isn't going to make it possible as long as I'm alive. It's just not going to happen. And that's where these catchphrases that, the old truisms that people use that just aren't true. So I'm glad you're of the scientific bent that doesn't go, anything's possible, because again, that's just
Yeah.
the.
Yeah, but it was interesting to note that when she said Sasquatch do not turn into trees at night, Leon had a crushed look on his face.
Leon,
He, his
what is going
shoulders
on?
just dropped and his head dropped, and these are
Why?
not my
Because it's
people.
because you're on thin ice, right? I mean, we're not, because we're all on the same page, I think. But just the topic, even entering into this style of topic is almost redundant, because you hear it right across the board on every topic, everything from UFOs to ghosts and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of stuff you're talking about reminds me of a documentary a couple years ago called Snake Oil Salesman, and it was about a whole
Yes.
bunch of shysters basically that are stuck in an idea, but they're basically taking people's money is what the whole thing's about. And
So, what do you
no
think,
Yes.
Julie?
scientific.
Does the Woo have any place aside from outside of the Sasquatch thing?
Well, I don't want to. I'm very aware of many of the um, oral stories handed down by First Nation, Native
Oh yeah,
American people that incorporate a lot of what we deem now to be paranormal. That they were just storytelling. What they had to compare it to then versus what we have, all the stuff now that we know about. Well, I have heard stories about some native tribes who believed that the Sasquatch could be trees. So I'm not trying to diss them on that. Um, that was something they believed, and how that came to be, I don't know, because obviously we weren't there, and a lot of this stuff wasn't written. It was more of an oral stories handed down. But I would never diss any Native or First Nation people's beliefs. But what I can say is when I see people now who are just going around going, yeah, like Dr. Johnson, what's his name? Matthew Johnson, is it? The doctor who's a psychologist or something who thinks that he's talking to Bigfoot from interdimensional Bigfoot that come into his room at night, and he names them all. One of them's Zorth and all this other. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's batshit crazy. Okay, I'm going to be the one to say it because that is just not. It is not. It's not provable. And if it was, he would have all the videos in the world showing that it was true. He would not be afraid to show us the video of the shimmering Bigfoot in his bedroom at night, but it's never happened. So if somebody's going to say all this stuff is happening and all this is going on and it's weird stuff involved in it, where's the proof? Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof. Unless you have it, then no one can really take you serious, and you look like an idiot.
But they get real angry. They get real angry about it if you question them on it. If you question where's the evidence, and they don't have it, they become very defensive and offensive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Julie, and this is the other thing is where so many people are hypocritical to the nth degree. They'll say, oh, First Nations legends say this, there's got to be a root of truth in it, or they put high credence into it. Then you take mythology from their own culture and bring that up. They go, oh, that's only fairy tales. Why is it the mythology of one culture is supposed to be based in reality, and mythology from other cultures you are dismissive, whether it's fairies, trolls, whatever?
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea that First Nations are somehow more spiritual than anybody else is also nonsense, because you look at a good portion of Europeans up until the 1950s were in pretty much rural farming type communities. You go into Asia even today, many of those communities are still in not cities, they're in rural or urban areas. And we just are dismissive of those claims, and then we put high value on another culture, and it's completely hypocritical. There's no base in it. We should look at the stories from every culture through the same eyes and with the same amount of critical thinking. And if a European says it and it doesn't pass muster, then it should be the same for anybody else.
Yeah, but don't you think I hear you. A little hypocritical at the same time to say that the indigenous people, whatever country, who have their own gods and their own belief systems and everything like that, are to be poo-pooed, while at the same time, if you're a Christian in the Catholic Church or whatever, you believe in these creatures that there's no evidence of also, I mean, there's no evidence of angels, there's no evidence of Holy Spirits, there's no evidence of you name it. It's all taken on faith, and that's it.
Yeah, that's part and parcel of the whole thing. I mean, and when you're looking at, because again, if you talk about, say, Zeus, Apollo, Thor, whatever, people say, oh, that's mythology. Mythology has the ring of not being true, just stories. And then if they're Christian, or if they're Muslim, they'll talk about their God as if that's fact, and other people's religions are stories. And again, I'm an atheist, so I don't believe in any of it. But again, if we're looking at from a cultural standpoint, if we're looking at people's, whether it's their mythologies, whether it's their religion, we should be using the same critical thought on any of it. And, there can be in some of the mythologies, maybe there is this a figure of truth in some of them, like the orang pendak. That's, I think the orang pendak is a good candidate where people may have actually seen them, because if you look at, Homo florensis, there's a creature that really matches a description in the orang pendak that was on the same island as where the orang pendak was, and that there are, quite possibly there was humans that did encounter them at some point in time, and those are stories being handed down. So we can't be just dismissive of everything, but we have to look at what the evidence is for existence when we are evaluating those myths and those stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. And I've never encountered a Sasquatch, so I can't be the one sitting here going, "Yeah, I know they exist." But I am also not going to tell some of my real good friends who believe that they have seen one and tell me about what happened.
Yeah.
I'm not going to look at them and say, "Oh, you're a liar," either, because they believe in their heart what they saw. And when somebody's telling me about their experience and they start tearing up, there's tears starting to well up in their eyes and the hair on their arm stands up, that's to me, that's something unusual happened. They actually believe something unusual happened because they're getting that strange feeling just talking about it again. So that there's something to what people are seeing, and I'm not going to judge them on that. It's just I have not seen one myself.
And that's the thing, is where sometimes witnesses get very offended for no reason, and that's where some people have that black and white view, because somebody can have what they believed was an experience, whether true or not, whether they believed it was real and it wasn't, or in fact it was real and we have no explanation. You can evaluate that and you can come to the conclusion that they're not lying, but have no explanation for it. And too often we get into the situation where when somebody tells you their experience, when they find out you don't believe in Sasquatch, they automatically jump to the conclusion that you're calling them a liar. And that's not the case. You could just say, "Hey, that's a great story. I have no explanation on what you saw." And Thomas uses the phrase all the time, if Sasquatch exist, you saw a Sasquatch. If they don't, I don't know what you saw. And that's
right.
That's where, both eyewitnesses and researchers, they do have to have that common ground that we don't have to explain absolutely everything. Sometimes it is, we got to put that in the side parking lot, and maybe one day we'll have more information and revisit it.
Well, that's the nub, isn't it? Because if people experience something and they tell you about it, and they find out that you do not believe in Sasquatch, then ergo, you do not believe what they're telling you. You don't believe them either. It's not a matter of you not believing in Sasquatch doesn't necessarily translate that I don't believe in what you're telling me, because I believe you experience something. I'm just asking you questions to clarify in my own mind what you might have seen or experienced. I'm not doing it to make a liar out of you and punch holes in your story. That's what people are afraid of. You're going to punch holes in their story. You're not going to believe them. And why should they even bother talking to you? Because you're a skeptic.
I'm going to jump in on here a little bit. I think the other thing is that I don't, when a person sees something that they can't explain.
Hey Leon, can you get closer to your microphone? You're a little bit low in volume.
No, thanks, Bill. You're the first person I keep asking these guys, how am I sounding? Because I got this new audio thing I'm trying.
You sound okay
and
to me.
They sound really great. And it's like,
yeah, you do.
I think I do. Okay, anyways, getting back to, can you hear me okay now? Is that all right now? Or
turn up the volume.
Where did you turn up the volume? How many more?
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
Now we can't hear you at all. You're muted.
His lips are moving.
Okay.
There you
Hear me
go.
now. Can you hear me? It's obviously watch. That does not
You
want
were-
me to say the next part. When people are talking about something that they're not sure of, first of all, they're embarrassed if they are wrong. It's tough enough for them just to even say what they're going to say because they don't know if they can believe what they actually saw. So I think it's kind of a damned if you do and damned if you don't. I'm hesitant to mention this other dynamic that just came out in the Olympics when you guys were talking about, cross-pollination culturally is a tough one, because if you come from a certain culture, you're going to perceive things a certain way, and you're going to misinterpret what the culture of the whether it be First Nations or French culture is or Greek culture is. And the whole thing that came up with the the Last Supper fiasco of how dare the Olympics come out with this whole thing of the Last Supper, and they're mocking Jesus's Last Supper, and none of that has to do with the Last Supper at all. If you know the culture they're talking about, which is the Olympics, nowhere in the Last Supper do you see Jesus sitting on the table around eating fruit in the middle of the table. It's two images that are very similar, but one is poisoned by one culture's concept that affects what they were trying to pull off in regards to their culture. Now, you could sit there and argue with me, do your research and find it out yourself. But I don't know if, I deal with so much of how the mind works with people, including myself, and knowing my gullibility and my own vulnerabilities in how your brain can take you on these rides. When you're dealing with people who are trying to tell you the truth, I don't know if they're, unless they're shysters. And yes, it seems to me that there's more shysters out here than what I was certainly hoping for when I first started this whole process. I mean, if I look at every video now that I got sucked into when I first came into this 7 years ago, and realized that every video I've seen since then, including those videos and pictures, are all been proven to be faked. So now that's 7 years. Give me something, Julie. I was going to ask you a little bit about this because you were talking about, some really good evidence that you've come across. And to me, it's always kind of important to make sure I ask that question when we have a guest on here, is to see what is some of the best stuff that you've come across, if you don't mind sharing that with people who are listening. So if you're still there, unless I'm not.
Well,
talking.
I can tell you. Yeah, I'm still here. Some of the best evidence, I think, would be tracks. Some tracks that I have found are most interesting. Not sure what created those tracks, but what I look for is more than one footprint. First of all, if I find like one footprint, then that makes me highly suspicious. But then I want to go look for the other footprints, because certainly there must be more in the area. So, I found some really decent, nice sized tracks, and boggles my mind to think something was out there that left those tracks, and I could run into it in the woods in my backyard or something. It just freaks me out a little bit. But I think that tracks, and again, I got a lot of really cool audio, but I don't know what made those sounds, so I can't claim that because I didn't see whatever it was that made those sounds.
I wanted to ask you about that, Julie. I wanted to ask you about those spectrographs. Now, one thing that occurred to me as you were talking about them, do they or the operator who's operating the spectrographs have the ability to say, get sounds that a black bear would make, and then cross-reference it with another unknown sound that a black bear could make, and be able to compare it to the sounds on file that you already have of a black bear? Would a person be able to say that this new sound right here is or is not from a black bear by using a spectrograph?
Well, I can't speak to that exactly,
just
but I
throwing
can
it out
tell
there.
you that. Yeah, but what I can tell you though, like with David and David Ellis's example, he has a library of sounds, known
Yeah.
species in different areas of the country, and he will bring up those sounds and put them in alongside the suspect sound,
Right.
compare the hertz range, the different signature aspects of the two for comparison, to not rule necessarily anything in, be ruled out, because you don't know
Yeah,
what your suspect vocalization is. But you
exactly.
visually, and most of the audio stuff that he does, what it sounds like is way less important than what it looks like, because he's been doing this for so. I mean, he can just spot something in an upcoming, like if you have a 15-minute audio clip, for example, and you put on spectrogram, and you can look into upcoming minutes and see the different signatures that are coming up. And when you see a certain signature that matches a particular sound that isn't this or isn't that, then it becomes suspect. And those are the ones you put on the side, and you're hoping that sometime somebody will have a murder out when a Sasquatch is there and they're seeing them do it. That's very rare. It could happen.
And yeah, this isn't going
but
to prove anything to you, but it's going to eliminate evidence.
right, he can say, well, if this sounds like a coyote and the signature doesn't fall in the known ranges of what we have documented on a coyote, then the best thing you can do is mark it as suspicious. But you would never say this is Bigfoot.
Right. Excellent point. That's what I was getting at. Maybe we could have used something like that, Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
If we had a you don't sound very convinced. If we had a spectrograph with all known coyote sounds on it, when we heard those sounds not associated with a coyote, maybe the graph would have said, yes, it falls into the range of the sound a coyote can make.
Well, it was really strange, because when I played our Chehalis sounds to a fellow who worked at the Vancouver Zoo, he said, "Hell, that you say that's a coyote? I've never heard of that being associated, that type of noise being associated with a coyote before." So he said it was such a rare sound made by a coyote. You may have actually found something we didn't know. I didn't believe that. Yeah, but the simple fact is the sounds were so unusual, and for the longest time we were so interested in, because they were associated with previous recordings of alleged Sasquatch.
Yes, the Klamath, the Puyallup.
And then when you and I actually witnessed a coyote making those sounds, and we announced that, boy, were there a lot of people who use these recordings and similar recordings in their call blasting decisions. They just didn't want to hear it.
Of course not.
Yeah, they just didn't want to hear it. I mean, we shot their Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. The thing with audio is you can never, unless you see what made that sound, you can't claim it's this or that. You just have to mark it as suspicious, put it in the suspicious file, and keep building your suspicious file. And then, like I said before, there's places all through America that have the exact same weird noises that I have going on here, and there's some mimicking things going on here that Bill was talking about earlier. I got some mimicking things going on, which is real strange, because it also happened to the lady over in Washington. There was something out in the woods that would yell out her dog's names from the woods
Yeah,
in a real weird, creepy voice, and they could hear it, and they caught it on recording a few times, calling to the dog.
Yeah, it's strange. It's strange. And with the Chehalis sounds, we had that attitude. We don't know what's making them. We're interested because of that, and similar sounds have been associated with, hopefully, with the Sasquatch. But then we saw what made it, and what they got upset is what we saw was not what they were hoping it was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
It was a disappointment.
Well,
It was anti-evidence. It wasn't evidence. It was anti-evidence.
Yeah.
Did you happen to get that recorded at the time?
Audio, we have audio of it, but no.
Oh, that's what I mean. Audio.
Terry and I, we're carrying cameras, but our basic reaction when we saw the coyote issuing these incredible cries was, "Damn, it's only a coyote."
Yeah, exactly.
Julie, I want to ask you, when you're interviewing a witness, the time you've been interviewing witnesses in your neck of the woods, have you noticed any basic differences in the witness's description of the subject in your area compared to the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia? Or are they all talking about relatively the same thing in their descriptions?
Well, I think I can tell you that the ones that I have talked to here in North Carolina are very similar. The majority of them are very similar descriptions, and usually it is around 7 to 8 feet tall. Rarely do you hear somebody say anything about a 9-foot or a 10-foot tall Sasquatch down in the state of North Carolina. It's usually 7 to 8 feet tall. It's usually broad-shouldered and cone-shaped head, no neck. Now, as far as hair goes, majority of the time it's very dark brown or black. The hair is not normally super long until you get up to the head. There has been many reports of them having the longer hair on the head that streams down past the shoulders. Heard that over and over.
Have there been any noticeable difference in, let's say, the footprints that are found? Like, a reason I asked that is there was a whole rash of incidents in Arkansas and Florida and stuff where people, from the eastern part, I've heard of people describing 3-toed tracks, 4-toed tracks, 6-toed tracks. Whereas here in the Pacific Northwest, it's always uniform 5-toed tracks 90% of the time.
Yeah, and that's the way it is in North Carolina. I know, at least, as I've rarely heard anything about. Now, I did hear about tracks that the right foot was missing a little toe on the track, and there were several tracks of both the right and the left foot. So they were able to look and say, "Hey, wait a minute, this track on the right, look at that. There's only 4 toes there." They think it was something they lost a toe, not necessarily like it might have been born that way. So, once in a while, but no, nothing like the 3-toed Honey Island swamp monster or anything like that here that I've been told about.
Now, I thought the Yowies, like, say, Texas, they were also 3-toed creatures.
Yeah, a lot of reports down there.
Yeah,
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Down in Texas, in the big thicket area and stuff like that, they come across a lot of 3-toed prints. So I don't know what the relevance is, but
It's weird, isn't it? Because you
Yeah,
almost got to think how a 3-toed foot could support the weight of a 9-foot creature. But that's just
yeah,
me.
Well, you do have that. You do have that tribe in Africa that has, and I forget the medical term of it, but it's basically clawed-foot, and it's just because of inbreeding, and it's it's a
Hmm.
genetic defect, and more than 50% of the tribal members have it. So I mean, there could be, if there are populations that are cut off from one another due to whether it's distance, civilization, or whatever, you could get genetic defects like that happen to a portion of the population. So there, you know, there
Hmm.
there are there are some, if it's a physical creature like a human or an ape or whatever, there are some genetic reasons why you could get things like that. Now, how that would they survive that, your question about how it would bear the weight and everything else. I mean, that is obviously relevant because it would seem to be something that would impede survival as opposed to make it easier for them.
Yeah.
And I imagine after generations, assuming that the Sasquatch does exist, there may be slight variations in their development from an animal that spends generation to generation in mountain country in the Pacific Northwest and
Hmm.
in swamp like country down in Arkansas, Louisiana, and places like that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm. Now, in
So
North Carolina, Julie, are you mostly woodlands and forests and hills, or are you basically a lot of swamp country too, or what kind of territory is it mostly in your area?
Well, in my area, it's mostly woodlands. Um, there's a few small towns between, like, say, here and Raleigh, or to my west, the biggest city would be Charlotte. I'm actually very, very close to the center of the state, like the geographical center of the state. So around us, we have it's very hilly and a lot of pine trees, a lot of hardwoods, and the pine trees. And then we do have a lot of water. We have like tons and tons of rivers and ponds, and north of me is Deep River. Um, so there's a lot of water, a lot of natural springs. Now, North Carolina as a whole, we do have swamps, like the northeastern part of North Carolina. The Great Dismal Swamp is up there. So we have everything from swamps to mountains, and of course the coastline. But the further you go west, of course, then you get into the mountainous area. So I'm about a 2-hour drive from the Appalachian Trail. So heading west from here would be, you're getting more and more into to heavy woodland.
Are the reports usually just fleeting glimpses of something, or for the most part in your area, or do you get a lot more where people are able to watch it, or how do you find that goes?
And a lot of it is what they believe they saw in just a few short seconds. Seems to be the majority of what people have reported. And like just down the road from me here, there was a sighting of one crossing the road from right to left. An elderly couple driving home one night saw this just down the road here a few miles. So um, a lot of times it's going to be crossing the road, or now, like in the Uwharrie itself, there's many reports of them being in the Uwharrie itself. And I think one of the most interesting ones, I didn't take the report, but it was told to, I believe, Matt Moneymaker from BFRO. There was some people that were riding their four-wheelers over there. We have a lot of trails over there for that. They were coming around a bend, and there was one standing there. And it dropped to all fours and literally chased them up that trail. Now that is just about 3 miles from me. So there have been some stories of them being aggressive. There's stories of them. There was a couple of guys sitting in some, I guess, lawn chairs or whatever they were sitting in over there in the Uwharrie, close to this, what they call the meadow, where a lot of weird stuff happens over there. Orbs, you see a lot of orbs and different lights in the sky and all this other stuff over there. And they were looking across this field, and there was something that looked like a Neanderthal woman on the other side of the field that was kind of swaying back and forth. And then they heard some like cracking sounds behind them. And there was 2 male Sasquatch belly crawling through the grass behind them. Now I've heard that story.
Yeah, I vaguely recall hearing that report myself. Yeah.
And it seems like, now I'm no expert, but that would just freak me out if there was one over across the field distracting me while 2 males are slithering through the grass towards me. To me, that sounds like predation.
Yes, that's stalking.
Yeah.
That's
So,
not an encounter. That's stalking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of freaky. I do hear reports about that, and a lot of bluff charging that can happen over in and around the Appalachian Trail area. There's, definitely a lot of sightings over there as well. A lot of it goes unreported as far as, say, like on the BFRO sighting or anything. A lot of it doesn't hit that area of documentation, but a lot of it's just people telling their story, what they believe happened to them. So it seems that the ones around in North Carolina can be aggressive and are very territorial.
Julie, do you get out to go ahead.
Yeah, Raptor Crazy has a question. Are you anywhere near Turtle Island?
Turtle Island, is that in the center of the state of North Carolina? I'm not sure.
The actual question from Raptor Crazy is, isn't she close to Turtle Island? The guys that on Mountain Men show. So I don't know.
I don't watch those shows. I wouldn't know.
Well, I'm just wondering if, I mean, that's just live action Scooby-Doo meets Finding Bigfoot. But it was just a question, so thought I'd ask her.
So, Julie, seeing where you live and everything, do you get out to convention and such and meet a number of these people that you have interviewed in the past or whatever?
You mean like Bigfoot conferences and stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I've been to them before, but it's not anything that I go to a lot. I just can't. It's just not my cup of tea, I guess I could say. I don't really. How can I say this delicately?
You don't have to be delicate.
You know me and my mouth. So I just don't. There's just no real true proof they exist. You know,
Right.
I've been invited. Let me say this. I've been invited to speak at conferences.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's great, you know, if it's informative, people like that kind of thing. But for me personally, I don't have any proof of what I have. I've had people say, "Hey man, why don't you come over to the conference and play your audio for us?" Well, I did something similar to that one time on a very low level, but it just didn't feel comfortable to me because I can't
Mhm.
tell you what those things are that's making these sounds. So it just doesn't feel legit for me. Okay. For me
Yeah.
personally. Um, so I don't do a lot of conferences, but you know, I do have a lot of friends who are investigators and go out investigating. We go to the Uwharrie quite a bit over here, you know, looking around, trying to figure out what in the world. I mean, there's been some really cool stuff taken over there in the Uwharrie. You might have heard of Mike Green's thermal imaging, what he called squeaky.
Yes, I have a copy of that. Yeah.
Okay. That was actually recorded and that is 6 miles from my doorstep.
Really.
Yep. I've actually been in an exact spot where he recorded that with him talking about it. So, um, you know, I don't really do a lot of conferences and there's nothing wrong with them. Um, I probably should do sometime just so I can meet more people. But you know, I do spend about 4 to 5 months out of the year over at the beach. So it's kind of hard to really get to all of them, even if I wanted to.
Yeah, that's understandable. I was just trying to see if I could raise that video. It's probably on my other laptop. Anyway, I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people go poo poo, but I find it kind of interesting. I find it the movements and everything. Someone, if it's not evidence, someone went through a lot of trouble to mimic ape
Yeah.
movements and simian movements, like that, because
Oh
that's what
yeah. Yeah.
struck me. That's exactly what a gorilla would do in my mind, you know. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's too
But
bad.
I'll tell you, once you get to the spot where that was recorded and you get a visual on the whole thing, it gives you a different perspective as well, because that was recorded in early spring, and the thermal imaging, you can plainly see that whatever the subject is and that capture does not have any light source for them to see.
Right.
And I don't know of anybody, okay, no sane person that I know would get buck naked and crawl up the side of this, um, where that subject was crawling up, belly crawling up.
Yeah.
Not gonna happen here, because we have timber rattlers, we have copperheads, we have brown recluse, we have blackwooders, we got things that'll eat you, you know, not whole, but just fire
Bit by
ants
bit.
that, oh my God, just nasty crawly things. So if he found somebody that was dumb enough to get buck naked and crawl up the side of that hill in the middle of the night at dark with no light source, then they deserve an award. That's all I'm going to say.
They deserve their own seat at the next conference.
I
Yeah.
would think so, because that would be very stupid to do.
Tell me something. Is there anyone out there that you'd look forward to interviewing that you haven't interviewed yet?
Well, I know there's a lot of people out there that are really great researchers. Um, well, the short answer would be yes. I'm sure there's tons of people that I would love to interview still. Thomas, what say you?
Well, if you're talking about on the shoulders of giants, I can
Yeah.
think of a few names we could get on as a guest. One, Leon
Yeah.
Thomas Good. Another.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
One Jerry Matthews. You want to open my?
That'd be a dull show.
There's a real strange fellow here in BC named Bill Reed, and
Yeah.
He doesn't believe in us. We don't exist.
Doesn't believe Squatch.
Break my heart. You guys interviewed me already.
Oh, that's right. We did. Didn't have you in a guest. My.
Wait a minute. Yeah, I was gonna say we had Bill, and I think I interviewed. No, I think I interviewed Leon a long time ago, didn't I, Leon?
I'm here. I just had to remember I was on mic. I don't think so. I'm not sure, Julie, honestly.
No, we haven't had Leon. No.
Well, not on Thomas and I shows, but I'm thinking I had you on Monster X Radio like 7 years ago.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't. I'm sorry.
I know.
Maybe.
I've interviewed. Yeah, I mean, when you get our age. But yeah, I'm sure Thomas continuing this endeavor for some time yet, because there's still a lot to be said, I think. And yeah, any of you guys would be great to come on the show.
One big regret, Julie, I have is our show started off because you want memories of the 04 Horsemen. I was very close to getting the late Peter Burns to come onto our show, and unfortunately he passed away.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. We were so close.
Yeah, I really had him interested in coming on. It was just a matter of arranging the time. And unfortunately, he finally passed away. But they're so kind of like we could get Rick Knoll, we could get we had Daniel Perez and
Todd Prescott and all of those archive type guys. Yeah. So Thomas, I'll make it easy for you. Name a few of your most memorable interviews on those Shoulders of Giants that you and Julie did. Yeah, I'm talking about the ones that you really learned something from, so, wow.
Wow, a great show is our 20th show when we had Bob Gimlin come on. That was a fascinating show.
Yeah.
Geez, all the names are going on in my head. Lyle Blackburn was fascinating.
Yeah.
When we had him on, he's the fellow that basically told me that most of the tracks found in Arkansas at the time of the Falcon Monster and stuff weren't three-toed. They were regular five-toed. All that three-toed stuff was basically based on one incident. But when they made that movie, that one incident was the latest and the most exciting thing to happen. So that's
it's almost like you need another separate program and call it the Mythbusters, not the hoaxers, but the Mythbusters, the shit that people have been believing for decades, and it's not true at all. It was something else originally,
Yeah. It would have been really nice to be able to interview the late Grover Krantz and the late Bob Timmons. Yeah, but we'll never have that opportunity now. Yeah.
No.
The one thing I'm a bit leery of is having guests who are selling books. Because if it turns out to be a great book, good. If it turns out to be a stinker, then you get the reputation of having been an advocate for it. I bought it because I saw the guy on your show.
Yeah.
And it's a horrible book.
Oh, man.
That's why you have to read them, Jerry. So you do your
That's right.
You know ahead of time, like, this ain't going to be working.
Thomas is the one that gets all the complimentary editions, not me. No one sends me a book to proofread.
Yeah.
I just bum it off Thomas when he's through with it. That's all.
Yep.
I'm very much hoping Daniel Perez considers me to review that new book he's coming out with on the Parrish and Gilman film. That's
Yep.
supposed to be a real jaw dropper. You know, I've been
Yeah.
hearing a lot about it.
Mhm.
I was very interested in talking to him. I spoke to him afterwards, and he enjoyed his time at the show,
Mhm.
and he was really looking forward to finishing up his project, so
Yeah.
we could all get a gander at it. And that
Mhm.
was a very informative show. But anyway, so I got one last question for you, Julie. With the ups and downs and ins and outs of all of this, do you think that Bigfoot exists?
Do I think that Bigfoot exists? I think that there is a chance that there is some type of unknown primate. There could very well be. It could very well be. The thing that always sets me back, though, is the absolute no proof, no real proof.
Yeah.
DNA
that's-
studies. I mean,
that's a
there's
bit of a
DNA
problem.
that comes back as unknown this or unknown that. The problem being, unless you have a whatever on the slab or a part of the whatever that you can take the DNA off to and scientifically verify that that's where it came from, that you're comparing it to, doesn't really help a lot as far as saying yes for sure. So I think that with the people that I've interviewed and the people I know on a very personal level who have told me about what they have seen and endured and gone through, not all of it's furry forest friend stuff,
Mhm.
some of it is somewhat traumatic, especially the ones that are bluff charged or belly crawled towards, or even the sideways spider crawl thing. No, I'm not having none of that. That is
Yeah, that one
terrifying.
gets me. That one gets me.
Yeah, that gets me.
The
But yeah, I
spiral
mean, I
crawl.
think the crab crawl or
Yeah.
the spider thing. No. But yeah, I think there could be a possibility that there is something out there. If it is, it's so extremely intelligent to be able to avoid us, and
How
that's
do you
where
how do you feel on a certain level then about the next big thing, which always seems to come along every 20 or 30 years? First of all, it was the PG film. Nothing before, nothing since. Then it was
yeah.
then it was well, of course there's the oh, my mind went blank. Oh my God.
Don't say the Skookum Cast.
The Skookum Cast was number 3. There's another one between P&G and Skookum. And the sounds, hail Sierra sounds.
Oh, Sierra
Nothing
sound.
before,
Yeah.
nothing since. Oh, people say, oh, yeah, sure, there's lots of recordings since then. I said, yeah, but not vetted and documented recordings like the
Yeah.
Sierra sounds were done. So your sounds are irrelevant to me, whoever made them or whatever made them. And of course, the Skookum Cast and stuff like that. It's doesn't it sort of just tick you off and people stop trying. It's
Yeah.
it's like
Well, I think now, especially with the technology that we have with the AI generated everything, that I don't think anybody's ever going to believe a picture or video again.
Well, I said 1,000 times, and I'll say it again right now. This time next year, that'll be it. I don't think the Bookwas crew will be around anymore, because you're not going to be able to believe anything you read, anything you see. It's all going to be just hypotheticals and what have you. There will be no more stone hard facts to cling to anymore.
Nope.
Even the footprints, I dare say, will be explained away in some fashion.
Yeah.
And that's what the only thing that keeps me and many others interested in the subject is the footprints, you know?
Yeah.
I think, and you've heard me talk about this before, and I'm not going to get into it because there isn't enough time left. But you've heard me talk about, do I ever have doubts about the Sasquatch existence? About 8 times a day. Then I talk myself out of it, and then things happen like Randall campground incident and the other incidents. It just sounds so incredible that you can't figure out what else could it have been. But I think 5 years is going to be vital because of those new wildlife underpasses they're building in the I-5 in southwestern Washington state. Because unlike the national parks in Canada, these will be covered by cameras 24/7, 365 days a year. And tunnels is really a bad word because some of these wildlife underpasses are about the size of a football field that they're building in Washington. And so I think between now and let's say 2030, they get video evidence of everything we know is there, and they don't get a Sasquatch. I really have to wonder why. The biggest problem is these new underpasses and the camera coverage aren't secret. So some fool will probably try something stupid with a ghillie suit or something at some point, and we'll have to watch out. And of course, AI is going to make things when it comes to photographic evidence. It's going to make everything. Well, geez, how will we ever know? And it's just worse rather than better. But it all comes down to the same thing. Science gets what science has always demanded, and that's a body or a piece of body or sufficient skeletal remains.
Yep.
Well,
yes, that's right.
For me, I think Greenwald from the International Cryptozoology Society or whatever. He passed away some time back, and the society is shut down now. But as he put it, from Monday to Wednesday, I believe we're going to get that thing any minute. It's going to come out of the forest, and we're going to nab it. And then from Thursday to Saturday, I think it's all a pile of crap, and I don't know why I ever got involved in it. And Sunday, I don't think about it at all. And that's the way it is with me. Yeah.
Or as the ones in the late 50s for the Pacific Northwest expedition, the late Renny Indian said, "Why don't you come out behind a tree any goddamn day?"
Yeah, right.
It just never happened. Yeah,
it never happened.
Remember, as far
Right.
as, again with eDNA and the advances we're making in DNA, we now have the genome collected for 3, human species. We have the Denisovans, we have the human, and we had the Neanderthal. And the Denisovans were taken from basically a pinky bone or a bone from a finger. So, this whole idea of needing a body is getting less necessary with eDNA. We're not at the point yet, but maybe in 20 years, where eDNA and genome mapping may become cheap enough that we might find something in an eDNA sample that they build a genome from. And even if it's something unknown, they're getting good enough that they could say that, hey, this matches a human genome for, let's just say, 99%, and these are the these are the parts that are different. So, there may be a point where the part of the body we need is as small as a DNA sample. Again,
and that would be awesome.
We may be decades from that, but we are moving in that direction.
Yes, and you might want to also say we've got that already because Dr. Gerald Lowenstein, the University of San Francisco, had DNA from 2 hair samples, one from Colorado, one from Northern California, in which he stated it's got positive results partially with human and chimpanzee. So we either got a man here with very odd problems, or we've got a chimpanzee running around with very odd problems.
That's
or
not
we
even
got something
close.
new that's rather similar to both.
That's
Yeah.
not even close, Thomas, to what they're doing nowadays with the
Oh, I know. This was back in the 90s, for God's sake.
and that's the problem is, depending on the test he did, it may have been destructive DNA testing. So those samples might have been destroyed.
They were. They had to,
Mhm.
he had to grind up the sample to get the result. Something they don't have to do anymore.
So
Yep.
there may be, there's nothing to compare that to. And a lot of those, they found, like when Sykes did his DNA study, what was it, 5 or 6 years ago, some of the material that had been identified as either unknown or human related, a lot of those in the genetic study were proven to be of known wild animals that had been previously classified unknown, and a couple of them even were brought out to be synthetic. So So you'd be very careful when you're quoting scientific research that was done in the 70s. I mean, if you go back to the 80s, they didn't even have DNA results that went beyond blood type. And here we are 40 years later getting, way beyond that. So who knows but where we're headed with this. And I mean, we're getting DNA samples now from tens of thousands of years ago, where it wasn't that long ago when we couldn't get anything more than a couple of years old. So it is progressing so well that the parameters of what we need to show proof of existence are shrinking. I mean, ideally, finding one, that died of natural causes, at the side of the road would be the best thing. But, I think this is where, us old folks, when, we're out of it, there's going to be, whether it's somebody doing an eDNA study for, salmon, what happens to salmon on the surrounding forest, after a salmon run, or somebody looking for, bear samples, whatever. I think those are the scientists that are one day, if there is a Sasquatch and it is out there, I think those are the people that are going to find it. And I really think it's going to be in an eDNA study, and everyone's going to go, holy shit. Now, again, I don't believe that'll happen. I don't think they exist. But if they do exist, that's the mechanism of discovery I personally think is going to happen.
I think we all said that at one time or another, all of us, that, the way this is going to be resolved is by a party out looking for something else that happened to stumble across something else. And that's the good thing about researching Sasquatch. It's a good thing because it gets people out in the countryside, and who knows what they might accidentally uncover about another mystery altogether. So,
well, a perfect example of that is the Bluff Creek, group. They had all those trail cameras out looking for Sasquatch, and they found that type of, I believe it was a marten, that they'd been thought extinct in that area for 70 years. And they had clear photos of it. So, looking for A, you might find Z.
Yes.
Right. And I had that happen to me in Ohio. There was a person that believes he had a Sasquatch on his property several different times. He witnessed it. And he had just hundreds and hundreds of feet of barbed wire fence. So I went down all of the fence lines looking for hairs caught in the barbed wire. And there was some that looked very unusual to me. And I wasn't quite sure what it was, but I wanted to have that checked out. So I gathered it and sent it off to Cindy Dosen, and she was able to verify that it was a bobcat hair. And the cool thing about it was there were no known bobcats in that county for over 150 years.
Yeah, there
And
you
I
go.
was able to put it on the map. And then about 9 months after that, somebody in that community actually caught one on a game cam. So we were able to put them back in that county after 150 years.
Yeah, my wife's uncle had something similar. He saw.
Okay, who got the squeak toy?
Oh, that's my
Yeah.
dog.
I don't know.
Put it down, Phil. Put it
Come
down.
on.
Let's squeeze.
That's
Fess
Finding
up.
Trackway,
Put it
isn't it?
down.
I think Finding Trackway's got the dog.
Yeah, Finding Trackway. He does have the dog. Who owns a squeak toy? Yes. I'm going to see if he's still here and bump him out.
But my wife's uncle, he saw
He
4
is still
wolves
here.
in an area, and he reported it to the COs, and he was laughed at and told that there hadn't been any wolves for decades in that area, and the next year, they were having cattle in the area killed by wolves. So animals aren't static; they do move around.
They do.
I know we're getting near the end of the program, so I do have a question for Julie that's completely unrelated to Sasquatch. And that's
Okay.
Okay, Julie,
Dum.
you're I think you're a self-admitted beach bum. Quite
Yes.
often you show on your Facebook fossils and other things that you've found on the beach. I'm wondering, have you ever thought of maybe on one of your shows or directing your show something towards the fossils you found or some of those other things that may be of interest that isn't Sasquatch related?
I hadn't really thought of that, but I have had myself personally, but I've had other people approach me and say, you should probably maybe do a class or do some type of thing and teach people what to look for and where to look for it and blah blah blah. And they think it would be really fascinating for just everyday average people who wanted to get out there and start collecting fossils along the coast, how it's done, what you look for, how to ID it, blah blah blah. So yeah, I mean that is something that could be done. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Because, like I said, I would myself personally, I would love to see a photo collection of what you've found over the years. Because like I said, I do follow you on Facebook, and some of the stuff that you find, I just find quite neat, and it's completely different than Sasquatch. And for those people that are watching, we are not one-dimensional creatures. We do have more interests than just Sasquatch,
Right.
with a possible exception of Thomas.
I knew you were going to say that.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay,
Thomas.
heading for the top of the hour, second hour here, folks. And Julie, you've been a real peach. Thank you for dropping by this afternoon. And you guys, I think the world of you, and you don't have to give me $5. I'll say it for nothing. I think the world of you. There you have it. And that's about it. And for you guys who are watching, I hope you enjoyed the show today. There will not be a show next week because people will be out of town at conventions and what have you. And so, as I said, I hope you enjoyed the show, and look for us again, same time, same place, not next weekend, but the weekend after.
Mm-hmm.
And
thanks for having me.
You're entirely welcome. It was such fun. We have to do it again. I think we only just scraped the surface. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good one.
Thank you for listening.
Bye, Julie.
Bye, guys.
Okay, stop recording.